Generally speaking, there's only one queen in the hive. Sometimes there may be a mother-daughter, and that'll tell you that I'm getting ready to have a swarm. So that may be the time, or maybe an older queen is just losing her, maybe she's running out of fertilized eggs, or maybe her pheromones are not strong anymore, and the colony's gone ahead and replaced her and just kind of swept her off to the side. So it's rare to have more than one queen in the hive, but sometimes there are. And then there's these guys, the drone, or some people call them flying sperm. That is their job. They don't have a stinger, they don't collect nectar, they don't collect pollen, they don't clean the house, they don't defend anything, they can't. They don't have a stinger. They're big though, but their job, about 10:30 in the morning, it's time to get up and get out and fly and look for a virgin queen to mate with. And then about, 4 o'clock, 6 hours, I've been flying hard and nothing's happened today. The ladies just aren't out. Go back home, tomorrow we'll try it again. Then along comes October, where the worker bees will say, all right guys, you're dead weight, we're not gonna feed you all winter. They'll literally drag them out. It's interesting, you'll see a drone just kind of dragging by his fingernails. If they have fingernails, 2 or 3 workers are literally dragging him off to the end, maybe flying him off and kicking him out in the yard somewhere. So the drone, if he successfully mates, he dies during that process. If he doesn't successfully mate during his life, he's gonna die about mid-October anyway, because they're just dead weight, and the queen can always lay some more unfertilized eggs that will turn into a drone next spring, and we'll have that population again. They're very important though. You gotta have that DNA exchange, or we don't get eggs. We would become workers and such. I don't spend a whole lot of time on the actual biology or the physiology of the bee, I guess, but they have a compound eye and 2 simple eyes. Their compound eyes have about 800 facets. So if you can imagine looking into an old kaleidoscope, that's what their images that they see would look like. 800 or so images of whatever they are. So they almost have peripheral vision. That's why it's hard to sneak up behind a lot of insects and try to squish it, because they can see all around them pretty much. The pollen basket or the pollen sac is on the rearmost pair of legs. It's like an upside down pocket that they pack full of pollen. So when you're in the health food store and you look at that jar, there's a green one, a yellow one, an orange one, a bluish one. I wonder what the heck plant that was. They're going to service basically the same flower throughout that day, or throughout that trip anyway. And they may go from one pumpkin to another pumpkin, but they're going to service the same type of flower, I should say, during their trip. So those little pellets may be different colors because of the pollen that plant produces. But yeah, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, but they're a true insect. They've got a head, thorax, and an abdomen. The respiratory stuff is all in the back end and so forth, but that's the basic of the bee. A lot of people say, I can't find my queen. Well, there's a color coding for years, and I have to admit, I don't remember. I think we're blue this year, but I have to check that. So a lot of the queens will come color coded. Ours will not be. The producers are throwing so many packages together. I mean, 2,000 packages a day or so to ship into a truck and a half a day. They're all week long. They're assembling these things. They're not going to adopt those queens. But if you special order one throughout the year, somebody may color one. Or you can always get a little device to screen to catch them and put your own pink or white or dot. It's nice to know that the queen that you put in April is the same one that's there in August. And if you see the dotted one, you know that, okay, good, same queen. But one way that's easy to find her, I mean, look, they all wear the same uniform. They're all kind of golden color with some brown stripes. But there'll be a retinue. It'll be about 15, a dozen or so bees will be following in an oval the queen as she travels throughout. These guys, literally, they're wiping her bottom. They're cleaning up her waste products. These girls here, I should say, are feeding her. Others are maybe cleaning up. Some of these workers are cleaning up the cell, and she's going to maybe go pop an egg in the cell here. But think about that. 1,000 to 2,000 eggs a day, that's one every few seconds. So she's royal, but it's more like a captive royal. She's well tended to, well maintained, but she works her tail off, literally laying eggs 24 hours a day. Maybe for about 5 to 10 minutes at a time, rest for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then another 5 to 10 minute egg laying session. She's got a tough job. Think of her if you're in the corporate world of HR, human resources. How many workers do I need a few weeks from now to service the flowers that are coming out, because the day's getting a little longer now. The bees are telling me that the days are getting a little bit longer, so it's time to start kicking out eggs in February and March. And May and July, May and June, they're really kicking out the bee population. This is a pretty important thing to know. Basically, day one, an egg is laid into a cell. If you look at the bottom of the cell, and we'll see some later on here in a little bit, there should be just one egg only, maybe at a slight little angle. If you see multiple eggs, we'll talk about that next week. That's the problem of a worker bee is now laying eggs. They're gonna turn into drones. If they hatch at all, we've probably lost our queen. So that's a sign that will tell you that there may be a problem. But one egg is laid in the cell. 3 days later, it hatches out to a little teeny tiny curved larvae. And they're fed royal jelly. We mentioned royal jelly a little bit ago. They're fed royal jelly, which is a very high protein substance that the younger bees produce for the first 3 days. After that, they're fed something called bee bread. Beekeepers aren't real ingenious with the names of things, but the bee bread is nectar and pollen blended together. It's kind of a little paste that the larvae is fed. And at 10 days, a cap of wax is put over that cell, and now we got metamorphosis happening. So we're turning from basically a worm, a larvae, into a developing worker bee. So they're grown, they're born adults, you might say. They chew their way out, rest for a few minutes, maybe a few hours if it's a worker bee, I should say. She'll rest for a few hours and start cleaning the house and doing some other things. This is good to know also from the day the egg is laid until they develop and chew their way out. The worker bee takes 21 days, kind of like a chicken egg, hatches in 21 days. Drones are 24 days. When we talk about the varroa mite, that's an important thing the varroa mite knows about. They like to crawl into the drone cells right before they're capped on that 9th day and start reproducing, because that drone is going to take 3 or so more days to produce, so that varroa mite can lay maybe another generation of eggs in that cell. So they're a real tough pest. And thank goodness the great designer of our universe gave us a new queen in about 2.5 weeks, because if the colony is missing a queen, they need to replace her as quickly as possible. So 16 days, she chews her way out. She'll maybe not do much, rest for about 3 days, and then go out on some mating flights. And that may take about a week or so of mating flights. So now is the situation, what's the weather like? Because she said, I gotta go. I got my maximum, this is day 3 now, day 4. I got my maximum sex attractant pheromone is, I got the right perfume on. The drones are gonna find me irresistible. It's raining, shoot. And that can happen. But that first few days after she's hatched out, she's not doing much. But the next few days is mating time. And there's a chart I found somewhere about it, depending on how old she is, the chances of mating, if it doesn't happen in the first couple weeks, just starts dwindling. Now she's an old maid, and they hopefully have to produce another queen to replace her.
Where's the queen go when she's mated?
They do it in the air. They fly in the air.
But you hear stories of queen killing queens.
Oh, yeah.
Competition. Does that happen in the nest somehow?
These queen cells here, and I've got one I can show you. These are queen cells, they're down below here. They look like a peanut.
Okay.
The first one that hatches goes to the others and dispatches them.
Okay.
So that's the one thing I'd have to disagree with the architect of the universe, is that I think I would let maybe 2 or 3 of them survive, go out and see who comes back, if anybody comes back. Because a bird might snap them up on the way too. That's a pretty thin link in that chain of survival. So that's just me. I'm not trying to make the world better, but these are all capped brood here, meaning they're at least 10 days old, or the egg was laid at least 10 days ago. These other ones are much larger. They look kind of like a bullet, like a little 22 bullet. Those are drones, because they're a lot larger creature. And the peanuts down here, that's a cell with a queen. These are being fed. They're not quite ready to hatch. Once they're capped over, and we'll do more about that next week, it's time to act, because you may have a swarm about to happen. So there's worker brood. Oh yeah, the queen cell's down there. And this may be a queen cell cup that they made and just for some reason just never put an egg in it. The drones down there, and they do everything kind of in a semicircle. So if this is my frame of honey, I've kind of a semicircle. They'll put nectar, pollen, and honey and such up here, and then all the brood rearing is done down here in a rounded shape for some reason. I've got a frame we can pass around that has some queen cells on it. This one here looks like it's capped, so she's probably just about ready to chew her way out. So you know what So there were 3 queen cells on this particular frame, or 4 actually, 5, yeah, several of them. I think it's pretty clean. You might not get sticky when you're done. It should be okay. Go ahead.
So whenever you said that they do it in a circle and there's like honey on the top, do you ever extract the honey on the top, or is that for them?
That's for them, because they're gonna take that honey, they're gonna blend it with pollen and feed those larvae as they're developing from the time they hatch to, when the wax cap gets put over. So that's more for their use. They gotta have that. We never get greedy when it comes to harvested honey. So the worker bee, her timeline, okay, first few days, she's gonna feed the brood and cap the brood. The younger bees produce a lot more beeswax than the more mature bees do. They're cleaning the cells. As the worker bees come back from the field, bringing in nectar and pollen, they will receive that drop of nectar or that pollen pellet and pack it away somewhere in a cell in the hive. Always time to clean the house. And then orientation flights. This is kind of, I always like this. I don't know why, it's kind of funny, but kind of stand there off to the side from the hive and you look, there may be 50 to 100 bees just kind of hanging around. And they're just kind of they're about a foot, maybe a foot and a half away from the front of the hive. And that's their first orientation flight. This is my house. You can hear them say it. This is my house. This is my house. This is what my house looks like. And they just kind of hang around and then they start going back in and some more come out. And the rest of the orientation flights in are following other worker bees out in the field to go collect some nectar and pollen. They'll spend some time guarding the hive. There's always guard bees. If you walk up to the beehive and kind of look in the entrance, there'll be a few bees just kind of hanging out, just kind of like the guys at the bar, the clubs, the bouncers. And if a bee comes in that belongs in this hive and it accidentally goes in this one, it'll smell a little different. They're going to escort it out, and usually that bee will be very submissive. But that bee may also be coming in and say, hey, we've got a big strong colony where I live. We're gonna rob you. We'll be back tomorrow. I know where you live. I know you got honey in here. So if they start fighting, the bees, the guard bees will kill it. But sometimes there's a robbing situation. We'll talk more about that next Saturday, because that's an issue there. I don't know why they call it robbing. It's more like pillage, plunder, and murder. Because that's what happens when another hive goes to a hive to clean out the honey that's in there. They murder everybody in sight. There are no, they're not even like the Vikings used to at least take some slaves, but they don't even do that. And the rest of their life is spent foraging, collecting nectar, water, pollen. Water is necessary for a couple things. They'll blend the cured honey with water to soften it up so they can make the bee bread to feed the young, or they use evaporative cooling, air condition their hives. It's 105 degrees out. There'll be a lot of bees maybe making 50 to 100 trips to your neighbor's swimming pool and back to put some water in there to evaporate it so it cools the hive down. What's really interesting, if we take that package cage and if you insert a thermometer in there, it'll be about 93, maybe 94 degrees. That's the temperature they keep their brood chamber. That's where the temperature they raise their young. And almost always, you insert a thermometer, always I should say, it'll be within a half a degree or so of that 93 to 94 degrees. That's just amazing. They do it all without a nest thermostat. I want to put a lot of time in here. There are a handful of bee varieties out there. The most common, the workhorse, the Italian. The New World Carniolan is a little darker bee. She's on the upper right side. They are a derivative of the Italians and such. A lot of bee breeders and universities are working from the Italian bee to make a better bee. The Africanized honeybee was an Italian honeybee crossed with a true native African bee. And a laboratory in Brazil, about the time I was born, about 1957, 58, somebody in that lab either disgruntled or by accident released, and now we have these crossbred bees. What they were hoping for is we'd have a bee that was as calm to work with as Italian, but as go get 'em as the African bee was. And they got a bee that was from another world. It was a mistake. So not all crossbreeding works out well. There's even a chart you can look at. I mean, there's some traits, for example, the Africanized honeybee over here. One being very low on the quality, so calm on combs. No, they're not. They only score a 1 or less. Defensive, a 10. Yeah, they're very, very defensive. The Russians are a 7. They're almost as defensive, but they build up early, but we still don't want to be keeping Africanized honeybees. So be careful buying your bees out of Texas. I won't say any names, but bee weavers been known to, I didn't say that. They've been known, one of the weavers has been known to sell some crossbred Africanized bees, and they've gotten in a little bit of trouble with that. They're very aggressive, they make honey, but they're tough to deal with, and you don't want that in your hive. Excuse me. Buckfast was, came out of an abbey, some monks developed that variety. But the most common bees you're gonna find available will be Italian, Carniolan, and the rest of them are just a matter of options, you know, they're harder to find. What we're gonna be getting in our packages, for example, will be a Russian hybrid, Italian, and then a Carniolan queen. I can only get a few Russians at a time, Russian crossed bees, I should say. The nice thing about these guys though, they do like to swarm, but what makes them really good is varroa mite. They can handle varroa mite better than the European honeybees can. Not as well as the Africanized bee does though. The Africanized bee can handle anything you throw at it. So again, some of these photos came from Bill and Candy Vendesco. We talked about the deeps. I didn't bring any mediums. For some reason, all my stuff's got ice coating on it today. But the medium highs are a little bit lighter. Those are usually used for supers above the brood chambers. The shallows I use for comb honey because that size of comb just works real well in the clamshell cases that I can easily buy. But when it comes to weight, yeah, 40 pounds for a medium, 60 or so pounds for a shallow, about 60 pounds or so for a medium box, and 85 to 90 pounds for the deep. So my brother's still strong as an ox, but we're starting to switch over to mediums for our honey production side. We talked earlier about the top bar hive. This is the one that I built. I have an observation window all across it, and my neighbor just got so fascinated with it. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, you buy a package of bees, give me $100 and you can have this thing. So, because I'm going to build a different hive now to play with. It's more of a natural style. The bees will build, we're talking 60-degree angles on the walls here, which is about what the hexagon would have to be, 60 degrees. So it's kind of a more natural thing. I've got a friend down in Derby who sells that comb to some Italian restaurant. I don't know what they do with it, but he gets a small fortune out of it. He makes money with his bees. So, this particular restaurant, they have a dessert dish that they make with that comb honey. I need to find out more about that, but that's just a, one style of hive. Entrance reducers, I like the metal ones. Those come from Glory Bee. They also provide pretty good ventilation. Your basic beginner beekeeping kit will come with a wooden one, a little tiny notch for early in the season or wintertime, a larger notch so that the bees can be more, they can defend a smaller opening. And duct tape is also a very good tool to have. You'll see a lot of older experienced people using duct tape. That's a chunk of wood. There's his entrance reducer right there. The purpose of that is to keep mice out in October. When it starts getting cool, you think, oh, the bees are gonna sting them. Yeah, they might, but if they're all clustered up because it's really cold, that mouse will go in there and just riddle the comb and make a nice big nest, bringing in all kinds of weeds and flowers, and not flowers, but different things, different products to make a nest out of. They will literally riddle up a hive. So here's how to get your honeybees. Sometimes people quit. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
So if mice go in there, mice are repellent to like mint. Are bees the same?
Actually, a lot of people use mints and things like that as integrated pest management treatments for like tracheal mites and things of that order. I don't know if you could put enough in there to keep mice out and not bother the bees, because too much of anything is too much. So that's a good question though.
What if you planted mint all
around? Bees love mint. Bees love mint. Almost any herb they love because the flowers bloom prolifically. They make a lot of nectar. So mint would be a good thing. Cat mint is one of the best bee plants you can have. And it's like a wild weed. Grows like crazy. That's a good question. I don't know if you plant mint around your hives, if that would really keep mice away very well or not. Because I've got, when I had hives in my backyard, I had cat mint right there next to them. And of course I keep mouse guards on pretty much all year round. So I don't know which was more effective at keeping the mice out. But that's an interesting thing to experiment with. But you can buy mature colonies. I've helped a lot of folks who quit for whatever reason. They were moving, retiring, going to their home, or just moving to another state, didn't want to take their bees with them. $400, $500 is about what you'd expect to pay for a mature beehive. Don't even think of buying one from July on, because when we lose beehives, it's in October, November, December, January. So you're buying that 40% risk of loss right there. So you're probably getting a good healthy hive from this person. They'll probably survive winter. But if the average loss of bees is 40%, think about that investment. Great way to get honeybees though. Nucleus or nuke hives, just think of that hive body over there about half as wide. They only hold about 5 frames. We'll see those here in a moment. The packaged bees, that's what we sell. We'll do some nucleus hives later in the year also. The nukes are usually only available about May to June because they'll start out as a package or maybe a split from another hive, and splits we do next week. So they're not available very early in the season. The earlier you can get your bees, and this is my sales pitch for our March bees, the better you're gonna be. Because you got dandelions, you got all these things blooming, henbit, all that stuff blooming early. If you get bees in May and June, you're missing out. They're missing out. You're doing them a disservice. May is still doable, but from June on, sometimes, some summers, there's nothing much blooming in July, so they may starve. They may never be able to build up to survive winter. So the earlier you can get your bees, the better off they're gonna be. Swarm, we'll talk about swarms here in a moment. A swarm doesn't mean they're attacking you, but a swarm is like, oh man, things are going great. The hive is just booming. We got dandelions and all kinds of weeds are blooming like crazy. And, oh, the guy didn't put another box on. I'm getting a little crowded in here. Let's kick out another queen. A couple weeks we'll get her ready. And a week after that, maybe she'll be mated. And a couple more days after that, she'll be ready to go. The new queen gets the old house. I don't know how that happens. Usually in a divorce, the existing lady keeps the house. And the husband and the new wife have to find something else. But so the new queen will generally keep the hive, and 60 to 70% of the bees may leave with the old queen and start up a new colony somewhere. And swarms are fun. We'll do a little bit about swarms here in a moment. And cutouts. Well, if you don't catch that swarm and they get inside somebody's house or their barn, then you can cut them out. Whatever you do, there's no such thing as free bees. They either cost you money to buy or a lot of work to climb a tree to get them if you're going to be that crazy about it, or to cut out of a building and a house. You may have to get scaffolding. Had a guy called me one time and said, "What's a beehive cost these days?" Well, I didn't think where he was going, but I said, oh, at that time a package was about 120 bucks for a package. Tell you what, I got some on the wall in my house. How about you cut them out? You can just keep them. I said, I'll tell you what, 250 bucks, I'll cut them out. You find somebody to fix your drywall or whatever I have to do, because I'm gonna do a lot of work in preparation of cutting out. I'm gonna depopulate that hive by trapping them out and get them down to minimum population. I work at a utility company, so I have an infrared camera I get to use in my day job, so I can go scan. Oh, the bees are right here in this stud cavity, but not over here. And I've got some really neat infrared photos of them, so I can tell what part of the wall cavity they're in. But you gotta cut all that out, go through all that work, make sure the neighbors aren't getting stung, the occupants aren't getting attacked, and it's a good effort to do a bee cutout. And my insurance policy says bee swarms, but not cutouts. Specifically, I have no liability insurance. So if I accidentally nick a wire and burn somebody's house down, I get to build them a brand new house. So packages are a great way to start. The process is called shook. They shake or shook packages. Literally, there's a funnel they're shaking bees out of. This other funnel fits inside this opening here. At the bottom of that lower funnel is a queen excluder. So if they accidentally shake a queen in there, hopefully she's large enough that she can't fit inside the cage. Some people will ship them. You can go on a website, Tractor Supply Company, 200 bucks. They will ship you a package of bees. Or you can get ours for a whole lot less money. But anyway, there's a happy lady with her package of bees. And that's how we started. That's kind of what it looks like when we're loading them up. Because we have to separate the Russians from the Carniolans, because when people order, I want that queen, I gotta make sure that I get them that queen. I'm not gonna go through the process of installing them, that takes a little while. Basically, if you get the bees through us, I got that hive right there, and I'll walk you through the whole process from start to finish. If you buy them from somebody else, I'm sure they've got some pictures on their website, or I can also send you my little sheet, a little cheat sheet, if you will, of steps. Basically, we're gonna spray them down so they don't fly unless it's really cold. If they come from our shipping to you, they're gonna be a plywood lid. Make sure the jar of syrup doesn't come out. Bang them down, remove the queen, inspect her, make sure if there's no bees on here, she's probably dead. So you wanna look at her, make sure she's surrounded by bees, brush them off gently, and take a few frames out of your hive. That one should be first. Attach the queen cage so her cage is exposed and not against the foundation, but so bees can come into her. Shake some bees on top of her. Replace the rest of your frames. If the weather's good, you can just lay the cage outside. The rest of them will crawl on in. If it's not good, we do this. Put an empty box on top of the one that you've already installed the queen. There's a tab with the queen. Some of them have a metal tab, some have a plastic one. Dump some bees right on top of her, set the cage nearby and the syrup can nearby. Don't be doing that because you want the bees to be upside down without holes so you can get right on top of that queen and keep her warm right away. And never put that cage in the bottom of the hive body. If it falls, dig in there and dig through all those bees and put her back on the frame somehow, rubber band, thumbtack. But if she goes to the bottom of that frame or that hive, she's probably gonna succumb to the weather, the temperatures, and not live through the night. Putting them in a package bees are all you can do. If you're doing a top bar hive, you can buy a nuke because a nuke has frames. And we'll look at a nuke here in a little bit, or nucleus hive. The queen will come in her own cage. Sometimes she'll have 6 or so attendants with her. Sometimes she's by herself. Just depends on the queen producer. She's got candy at one end and a cork. Again, what we would do, our process was to, on the other end is another cork, pop that cork out, shove a marshmallow in there, and put that down. This cage is exposed. The bees can communicate to her. They'll chew their way through that marshmallow, maybe a day or two, or leave the corks in and just come back in 2-3 days and either pop the cork and release her or peel the screen off and let her go out on her own. But that's all on my sheet. Like I said, I'll walk you through that when we do the pickup if you get the bees through me. That's what a good installation should look like. A troubled one maybe like this. Actually, this young lady's setting up to wear a bee beard. If you ever heard of people doing the beard, they put a rubber band or on a necklace chain, a queen in the cage right under your throat, and then the bees will come on up and they're well fed, so they're not going to be in a stinging mode. And that's what they're doing here. This is the process of getting a bee beard together. The care for them, let's see, we do that, there we go. They're gonna need some syrup, because that little can, depending on who your supplier is, how many days they spent on the truck or on the, in the mail. Usually they're gonna ship them on a Monday if they're shipping through mail, that way it gets there during the week. Maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday, you'll probably pay overnight expedited shipping. That's why the mail order queens or packages cost so much more, because they're expediting the shipping. Don't ever feed them out in the open like the one on the left. That could cause robbing and literally dog fights and other situations. I like either a hive top feeder. I've got a frame feeder over there, which is this device right in here. Either one of those are my favorite. You may have to heat the water up to blend the sugar in with it to make your own syrup. But in the spring, it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and the easy thing is a little 4-pound bag of sugar, half a gallon of water. They weigh the same. They both weigh about 4 pounds. So that's your ratio for the springtime. In the wintertime, you have to feed them, or in the fall, you have to feed them, I should say. It's more like a 2-to-1. That's hard to get that much sugar to be in a syrup solution in the water. Well, that's a common feeder that comes with the beginner beekeeping kit called a Boardman feeder. Just a jar that inserts into the opening of the hive. This particular hive top feeder, I forgot who makes them. I'm not that crazy about them because I've heard, I never had one, but I've heard because the entrance that the bees crawl up is on the outside. If it's really cold, they may not like that. They may like this one better, built by Man Lake, because they come right up the middle, get into the hive. Now your top bar hive, you'll probably have to use a Boardman feeder inside or in the front entrance or something like that.
Have you ever used the batting type?
I haven't, but a lot of people do that in the wintertime for emergency feeding, and that would work. I don't know if that would work on top bar hive. You can put it inside, I guess, with the bees. That should work okay. Pollen patty, I always do a pollen patty with my packages because they got nothing. They have no pollen stored up. An overwintered hive probably has some pollen stored up, but a lot of times I'll feed even an overwintered hive about, say, late February, mid-February, when they start laying more eggs. Because remember, they're getting ready for the March and April weeds. So in February, they're starting to produce a little bit of eggs anyway. Pollen patties are great for a substitute to give them that protein that they need.
Any concerns about diseases in pollen patties?
Yeah, I like Scientific Beekeeping. Randy Oliver just swears by Man Lake. That's what I've been using for years also. Man Lake Ultra Bee. And his research has shown that seems to be the best ratio.
That's a liquid stuff?
No, that's a powder. It's either a dry powder or already in pellets, or a patty. I make my own. I use high fructose corn syrup, real thick Karo syrup basically, and the dry mixes. You get a real pasty, gooey mix as you're doing it. It's kind of hard to stir it up, but then you just spread them out between wax paper, because you know, you're doing 30, 40 hives. That's a lot. I mean, it's $40 for a little box, a little 10-pound box, or I can make my own for a third of that price. So yeah, the patties are good to help get them started anyway. Or this is a bucket feeder. It's got a little feeder lid in there. You just insert it into the frame. And I prefer feeding a way like this, or a frame feeder, which I think is next. Yeah, no, that's the ornament feeder, or something inside the hive so that wasps and other critters aren't competing and stealing their syrup from them. The frame feeder in the upper left, that's the one by Man Lake. We use a little different brand, a little bit cheaper, but has the holes are actually like a little ladder. They call it a cap and ladder. It's a little pass this around, I guess.
Do you have much drowning with that type?
With these type, we don't. With the open top, a lot of bees would drown, or you can put a board in there that would float, but this little ladder's in here, they can crawl in and out real easily. So, should have a flashlight, I guess, so you can see what's going on in there. I need a van of white type of system. So now we're moving from packages to nucleus hive. That's a nuke hive. It's a small 4, 5, or 6 frame hive. What you'll do, they also make them in a cardboard version. I don't think I have any photographs of those though. Those are the ones that they'll ship, or the cardboard, or a lot of guys use them because they're pretty cheap. They're like $7 or $8 when they're buying a lot of them. To buy one of these is out of Man Lake's like $40, I think, it's just a little wooden box about so big it'd be easy to make without a whole lot of investments. But when you buy your nucleus hive, you want them to have a population in them. There's a real nice couple from Sublette, drove all the way to Iowa last June to pick up their bees. And I don't even want to say, because the company they bought them from, Iowa said, these guys are great to work with, but not after their experience. They got, in their 5-frame nucleus package, they drove all the way up for maybe that many bees. And I mean, that's just literally a couple of handfuls. These people got taken. I can't believe that company let that go out the door. But a nucleus hive, the queen's been in there a while. They may have some pollen nectar stored up, because they've been working together for maybe a month or so. That's why they're not available too early in the year. And to transfer them, you just take frame by frame, put it in. Yeah, there's a cardboard, one of the cardboard shipping containers. Just transfer them into your hive. I would say put them in the middle, not to the edge. Then you can put your feeder right next to them, or right on top of them, and empty frames on each side. But if you put them in the middle rather than the side, they can stay warmer easier. Or you buy a mature colony, again, inspect it. If you open it up and something smells really sour and rotten, they may have a small hive beetle situation going on there, or something that doesn't smell good, because nothing smells better than a beehive. It just smells good. When the extractor is spinning and we're processing honey, oh, it just smells so good. But you want a nice, healthy, booming colony, and don't be getting them too late in the year, because again, they may not be able to survive winter, or they may be laden with varroa mites or something. Who knows what you're buying. Swarms are fun. I love swarms, especially when there's somebody else's bees that swarm. What was it? Late June. I don't have my cell phone, my good cell phone with me. Got a video of it. I was out in the backyard and feeding the koi fish. And I'm like, what the heck is this sound? Look around, there's a swarm. I've been coming over my head, headed for my stack of empty beehive boxes. Oh, well, cool, they're coming to me. I had no idea whose bees they were, because I can't have bees in my backyard anymore because of my wife's deal. So then I found out about almost 2 miles away, there's 4 or 5 beehives just straight west of me. That's where these girls came from. And there was a cluster. I mean, they just filled it outside. It's quite the video I got, but so they were somebody else's bees, not mine that swarmed.
Wait, did you catch them?
Yes, I did, because they crawled right into one of my open boxes. I mean, I had a lid on it, but it was cracked open, and they just crawled in there, and I put the cover on that night, hauled them off to a location, because I told Sandy, hey, check this out, look what's going on in our backyard right now. She goes, oh my God. So, so she had to stay in the house for a while. Hiding a swarm can be pretty easy. If you're lucky, they're only about waist high, which is not very often. But here's Bill Vandeska, and he's basically just kind of tapping the branch into a hive body. This is one I got last late May, I think it was, over on Haney. think it was Haney. 13th Street's just right over here, about 3 or 4 houses away. But that swarm, like a 7-foot ladder, add another 7 feet, so it's about 16 feet in the air. There's my wildcat BVAC. I went to K-State, sorry.
Did somebody call you on that one?
Yeah, a guy called me, he was a honey customer,
Oh.
and, from the farmer's market, and he called me up and said, hey Greg, I'm reading your phone number right off my bottle of honey. He said, I think I got a swarm in my locust tree in my front yard. Cool. And it happened to be a weekend, so I could take off right away and get to it.
What month was it?
I think it was late May. I'm not sure whose bees they came. I know there's a young man that has a hive somewhere in this immediate neighborhood. Could have been his. Heck, it could have been Karen Doherty, the city manager's wife, but she had a hive in her backyard and just kicked out swarms like crazy. There's an old vacant well house down on 19th Street, down by Lincoln Drive here in Hayes. I put a swarm trap on it for the last 4 years. Basically, it's just a weathered looking hive body with a lure in there that's lemongrass and some other compounds in there. I have yet to catch one, but I think that's a perfect location, but apparently it's not. I have yet to catch one at that location. So, because those would be easy, I just, all I gotta do is put the lid on more appropriately, put the bungee cord around it, crawl down with the ladder and go in the back and pick up and go home. Well, not home, but nearby. So this one I had to vacuum out of the tree. This is a swarm. This is a funny, we talked about the books. This young couple live on Willow Drive, and they bought their first bee package from me this spring, and he calls me and said, you know, Greg, my Beekeeping for Dummies book says the first year package won't swarm. I said, you got them in March, not May, remember this. I said, yeah, they're swarming right now. They're up in my locust tree, or whatever tree it was. Can you help me? So I brought the wildcat bee back. Basically what I did, I took a 5-gallon bucket, I got a cage that goes inside of it. When you put the lid on, there's a opening here that the vacuum hose, slide this over and there's a hole. Vacuum hose inserts in there. The bees don't go through the vacuum is plugged in. It's a Ryobi cordless vacuum. All my drills and stuff are Ryobi from Home Depot. That's where I got the bucket too. And so basically I put the ladder, or the vacuum up on the ladder, strap it up with a bungee cord, climb up the ladder with the vacuum. It's got a shoulder strap on it. This is all just home engineering. And I've got three of these cages because they're well screened and ventilated. You take them out when they're full and then put them in the shade somewhere. Heat will kill bees, heat will kill them. They don't freeze. They can tolerate a lot of cold, but heat will definitely kill bees. So you want to remove them from the bucket as quickly as possible and put them in the shade on a nice breezy day. There's a fellow's wife helping hold the product. Bill and Candy Vendeska, they've got a bucket on a pole. I'm not quite, I've seen it, but I don't know quite how it attaches, but basically if they're up in a tree, they can bump that bucket underneath the swarm. Swarm will drop into their bucket, you pull a rope, the lid doesn't snap on, but it covers on the bucket. Their ventilation screen is up there. And here's Candy driving down one of the streets in Wichita with their newly captured. Swarms are usually pretty docile. You wouldn't want to do that with a July hive, but a May swarm is probably okay. And these guys have been keeping bees for a long, long time. They're pretty experienced. Here's Bill again, just snipping a branch off a cedar tree and with the homeowner's permission. Cedar trees people don't usually mind, but just basically bump it into the box and away we go. Cutouts. That's a full stud cavity in a granary, I believe, that my brother was doing. No, not my brother, that's not his suit. But he did one also out of a granary. They had to cut out the inner wooden covering, find out where the bees were in that area, and remove them into, you take the comb and rubber band it onto some hollow frames or empty frames, put them into a hive body, and buckets of comb and a whole bunch of bees in the vacuum. His vacuum and a lot of people's vacuum uses cages like the package cage for their. Mine fits in a 5-gallon bucket, so my cage is kind of a hexagon. Some cutouts require you to rent scaffolding. Here we go. There's no such thing as free bees. That's a lot of work to cut out that soffit to get up into that attic. I saw a lot of photos on that particular colony. They've been in that house for a long time. And there's Bill and Candy working that house in Wichita, getting the bees out. So I mentioned earlier, they either cost you labor, they cost you some money, cutouts are risky and expensive. My insurance policy excludes liability coverage for cutout work. And I mean, it's in one sentence, it's clear as black and white. It's considered pest control work. And a swarm, if it's too high in the tree, it's not worth your life. I mean, I've been called up and you look and they're about 40 feet up in a cottonwood tree. Well, that's cool, thanks for calling me, but I'm going home, I'm not gonna climb up there, it's just not worth it. Had a lady in Russell one day called, there were some bees in her house, and they got into one of the bedrooms, and she was literally crying on the phone. I said, I don't do cutouts, but I know a guy who does. So I gave her his phone number, and she is crying, these bees are gonna kill her kids and all that. I said, calm down, they've probably been in there for years. Now, if your kids are allergic, I hope they're not, but yeah, there could be a situation, but I don't know anybody to saw open their house and risk burning it down and all that. So we're about to wrap up, then we can go into some questions if we have. We talked about some equipment we need, desirable location, millions of flowers, water, windbreak, feed light syrup in the spring, a heavy syrup in the fall if you have to feed them then. How to get your bees, get them ordered soon, because these package guys sell out. And the last one, what did we forget? What time is it? I think we're good on time. Wow. Got done earlier than I thought.
How much do your packages cost?
$140. Taxes is all built into that. Yeah, you can get them ordered, like I said, Tractor Supply Company, I think they're $199.99 shipped to you. And your postal person, you might want to let them know if you know the mail carrier, say, hey, Jim, I got some bees coming, call me. And because you don't want them in their truck. You don't want them out in that truck any longer than necessary. Most of those guys will be delivering packages in April and May. So like Man Lake, I think they're $190 some. So yeah, a lot of that expense is getting them shipped. And ours are $140. That's either Italian Queen or New World Carniole Queen. And I think I've got 5 or 6 the Russian hybrid queens left. But which are the best? Well, I don't know. I drive a Dodge, and my brother is a Chevy guy, so no, he drives Dodges too. I think the Italian is probably the best all-around bee, the best workhorse, a quick build-up, a really good bee to have. There are some unique ones out there like midnight bees. You can't even find them anymore. You could pet them like a kitty pet. They are such, but they can't handle any disease or any pest either, so they don't exist anymore. But they would have been your ultimate bee back 35 years ago when I first started. Yo.
Go ahead. I was just gonna ask you when, we ordered the butt fast.
Right.
If at some point you add another type of Russian queen or some of the queen, is it more likely to will they take on the queen's traits then, or?
They'll take on the drone. Something I didn't mention about the mating process. When that queen goes on her mating flights, she's gonna mate with a dozen, maybe 18 or 20 drones. So the first guy there wins in the flight, because they do it all in the air. As she's flying alone, the lead drone is gonna be the first one maybe to attach, and then his reproductive organs rip off, he falls to the ground and perishes. But then she may either go back to the hive or go out for another flight and make another round with the next guy who comes along. And that'll go on for several days.
But when she lays her eggs in, is it more likely that she'll take on the traits of the drone or pass along her traits?
It's gonna be probably either way, however the DNA happens to come out. They generally will not mate with siblings. So the queen from her hive is not gonna mate with the queen of drone from their hive. They smell the same. They got the same pheromone. Yeah, I don't really have an answer. I know there's some people that do all the genetic studies, they can tell you the correct answer. I can only speculate and say, well, we got probably 15 to 18 different drones of all kinds of mix. There's gonna be some of her DNA and all of their DNA. Because you notice some hives along the way during the summertime, they'd be really, all of a sudden they're mean. They're harder to work with. Okay, they got young to protect and all that, but maybe that next drone in line, that's the sperm that's treating those eggs. That may be, maybe he was a tough bat. He might have been an Africanized bee if they came from Texas, maybe. So yeah, it's really hard to say. There's my allergic wife and our little granddaughter who's never been stung yet. Hi, Dilly. Go ahead.
the farm where I'm going to be doing this is in Ellsworth County.
Uh-huh.
I'm not too far from Jim Morford.
Oh, yeah.
Does he do they order bees there? Would I be better off?
They ordered some last year, but that order got canceled, so I don't know if they're gonna order any bees or not. I haven't spoken to
I
Jim in a
just
little
thought
while.
transporting them from here